This is TWIS. This Week in Science, episode number 991, recorded on Wednesday, October 23rd, 2024. How much toilet water would you drink? I'm Dr. Kiki, and tonight on This Week in Science, we are going to fill your head with ovaries, polar bears, and polarized people. But first, thanks to our amazing Patreon sponsors for their generous support of TWIS. You can become a part of the Patreon community at patreon.com/thisweekinscience.
Disclaimer. The following hour of programming contains science. If you are allergic to science, science has a remedy. If you think science is boring, science will reveal its wonders. If you don't know what science is, science has an answer. If you are afraid of science, science will protect you. If you question science, are skeptical about it, science invites your curiosity. If science seems confusing, science can clarify. If you think science is too complicated, science can be super simplified. If science feeds your thirst for knowledge, fuels your imagination, and fills your brain with well-reasoned thinking, you've come to the right place, because we have all of that and more here on This Week in Science, coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening. What's happening? What's happening this week in science? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening this week in science?
Good science to you, Kiki.
And a good science to you too, Justin, and everyone out there. Unfortunately, Blair is not joining us this week for the show, but we'll be talking about her polar bears. Yes, they're her polar bears. Happy Mole Day, everyone. It is 10 to the 23rd, right? 6.022 times 10 to the 23rd. You know what that number is? Avocado's number? No. Avocado's
number.
No,
My goodness,
number.
I'm going to have to go back to... They've been adding a few... People have been claiming numbers. Now that it's like a name generator out there.
It's not a name
Intrigued
generator.
Avocados number. Wait, what?
Yeah, I don't know.
That's
There must
how you
be.
can tell AI is taking over.
These little mistakes, the blips in space-time, in the fabric of our reality. No. This is This Week in Science, and thank you everyone for joining us for this episode. We are really glad that you are here, and we have a great show ahead, including an interview with Pepperdine University professor Dr. Steve Rouse on learning to love toilet water, or at least to learn how to drink it without complaining. We also have...
Just to be fair, before we get into this too deeply, I want everybody who had any kind of visceral reaction to understand that all water that you encounter in this world was at some point somebody else's toilet water.
Mhm.
Like from fish to bacteria to any other organism that has been on this planet, that water has passed through or been used as toilet water. So, yeah, like don't get too hung up.
You think
on this concept. It's not all new water.
Are we having this conversation now? No, we're gonna wait.
No.
For our guest to join us.
Just before we get our shock factors too high up, it's all toilet water.
It's toilet water all the way down.
Water.
Okay, I got it. I have stories tonight about Tasmanian tigers, simulating social media, and the best human bias ever. What do you have for us, Justin?
Oh my goodness, I actually wrote down the things that I brought. What do I have? I have... Oh my goodness, this is going to be fun. Real-time ovulation.
You? No. What?
Yeah, I brought it. Anyway, okay. I brought the ovulation.
You brought it. Good, thank you.
And then separate story, doulas. Study on doulas found them massively improving health outcomes. It's a Medicaid study, which is going to be important because it just recently got expanded. And maybe a silver lining of global warming. And we're without Blair, so I've also got a few other things that I pulled up that we may get to if time permits.
Yeah. All right. Well, I would ask Blair what's in the animal corner. She was going to talk about poor polar bear paws. And maybe I'll bring the story up without as much detail as she was going to before the end of the show. But right now, I want to let you know that if you are enjoying the show, you don't have us already subscribed and everything. If you want to do that, find us as This Week in Science podcast, wherever your favorite podcasts are found. And we broadcast live weekly on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch, Wednesdays, 8 p.m. Pacific time-ish. But you can find all the information at our website, TWIS.org. Time for the science?
Let's bring it.
All right. So this story I did bring because Blair was going to be here tonight, and I figured it would be a fun little, a little needle for both of you. But we've been talking about de-extinction for a long time on the show. Colossal, the company that's been trying to restore the mammoth. They've also talked about de-extincting the dodo and recently the thylacine. And Blair loves the thylacine. The thylacine is the Tasmanian tiger, or more accurately, because it's not a tiger species, it's more closely related to wolves and dogs, the Tasmanian wolf. So Colossal has been working with University of Melbourne and researchers at in a lab there that's working on specifically marsupial species run by a researcher named Andrew Pask. And they announced several advancements, not through publications, not through peer review, but in a South by Southwest Australia panel discussion this last week. The timing, interestingly, coincides with the launch of their Colossal Foundation, which is raising money for investment, and that they say will be spent to rapidly deploy to help with extinctions and research around the world. So it's an interesting thing. It's science by press release-ish. It is not. This so far hasn't been peer reviewed, and we do hope that it will be peer reviewed. But what they say they've been doing is really fascinating. Number one, they have been working in this de-extinction process on the genome of a related species of marsupial that they are going to be using, and they're actually starting to use to bring the Tasmanian tiger back. The researchers have been trying to work on this related species and see what the specific genetic differences are, so that they can basically genetically modify it and turn it into a Tasmanian tiger. And this species is called the fat-tailed dunnart. I love species names in Australia. So the fat-tailed dunnart is most closely related to the Tasmanian tiger, has like 99% or 99.9% relatedness. And the exciting part of what they've been working on here is that they have developed new methods they are developing new methods to do genome editing at multiple points without massive amounts of off-target effects. We know off-target effects are the changes in the genome that you don't want to be happening in places where they might have
additions, deletions,
these
sorts of things. Right.
And so far in genetic modification, whether CRISPR or any other methodology, you don't usually have it happening in lots of places at the same time. It's usually at very limited locations and very highly controlled. So if this technology were to become actually applicable, it might have influence and application in all sorts of genetic modification for many different species for reproductive purposes. Not pointing at my own head right now. No, I don't need any genetic modification, but
Oh, I do. So one of the things. I just want to. I don't know if I misheard you or just want to clarify. This is not related to canine species at all. It's a marsupial.
It is a marsupial, but
looks.
it's
It
like a
looks
wolf.
like a wolf.
It looks like a wolf. It
like
looks.
a
That's right.
wolf.
You're right.
But
You're
it
right.
is not related any more to a wolf than it would be to a tiger or a dolphin, right? Like this.
Less closely, yeah, because it's a marsupial. It's not
that's why the thylacine I think is always like so fascinating.
Yeah.
Because if you look at it, you're like, that's a canine, that's a dog or a wolf species,
right?
For sure.
Yeah, and the reason I said
it's a convergent type of an evolution, but that makes their job more difficult because you could use a wolf or a fox or some kind of canine species to infill if you're missing data or something like this. Kind of like the woolly mammoth they're doing with the elephant. Like, we're missing sections of woolly mammoth DNA, so we can use a close.
Yeah, so let me move on from this because this is what they've been doing because of the convergent similarity of these animals to the canids. The jaw and skull morphology is similar in its length and breadth. The thylacine craniofacial shape, they've been analyzing genetic segments that are related to how the face develops. And they messed with a whole bunch of regions of the genome and what they call thylacine wolf accelerated regions. And they predict that they will drive similarities between thylacine and wolf. They've tested these gene segments on knock-in experiments in mice, and they found the mouse skull moved in predicted ways and confirmed the drivers of head shape and the changes that would happen there. So they're starting to put those genetic edits into the fat-tailed Dunnart embryos. And then additionally, they found a head in a jar at a museum of a thylacine's head. And it's really grotesque in a preserved head, but they could take tissue from the head and they sampled it, were able to get the most complete genome of a thylacine to date. They are only missing a few segments in between bits and pieces, and they think that they can fill those in based on understanding of this relation between morphology and function, and they think they can fit it in. That said, they also were able to get mRNA, messenger RNA, which is indicative of the bits of the genome which are being translated into proteins within the head region. So they believe that they have markers telling them which proteins were being turned on or were active before this individual in the jar died, for the muscles, for the eyes, for the brain, that these little bits of instructions would have been relevant, and that this is important for understanding how a living animal should be. This is not to say that they are there yet. This is not to say it's peer reviewed, but there's a whole bunch going on. They also want to put cane toad resistance genes into their thylacine remake, because there's too many cane toads in Australia, and they don't want
you're creating a foods net web that eliminates an invasive species. That's very clever, and that will probably then, of course, allow them to get tremendous funding.
Yes, they're also going to, and if they are able to get a resistance gene, they can breed into the quokka, which is another predatory animal that eats the cane toad and is becoming is endangered at this point because of how many cane toads they have eaten and died from. That they might save the quokka as well.
I find the convergent evolution genetic portion of this very fascinating. It's one thing it's an evolutionary trait, the long snout. You can actually see it with tigers and lions. If you compare the two, you see that
tigers have a longer. Don't tigers have a longer snout?
No, tigers have a very short snout compared to the lion's sort of projected face.
Now I need to look at pictures.
Yeah. And what those differences are, especially if you look through lots of different species and where they exist. Tigers are very, of the cat family, have like the longest. They're also the most prominent plains hunters. So what they found is it has to do with, partly to do with distance vision and having that snout. How those two correlate to the evolutionary path, but it tends to be open plains animals that are predators especially, but have these longer snouts versus more jungle or condensed area tend to have flatter faces. It has to do with the long range vision
versus close up. Yeah.
And so that makes it had not occurred to me at all that you could actually potentially use convergent pathways like that to control morphology. That's very fascinating. Hopefully, though, if they have a head in a jar and they have a pretty decent genome, that they might not need to borrow for those traits. But it is a very fascinating idea that you could have convergent DNA, not just trait. I think it'd be that's very.
And I was incorrect. I said quokka. It's the quoll, cute little species that I'm very sad to be sharing is becoming endangered because of cane toads. Look at this cutie pie.
Oh, no,
it needs to be able to protect itself from the cane toads.
It needs to be able to eat toads.
Yeah, the question is now, does this company, Colossal, they say they want to help save the species that may go extinct, right? To help us if we can't change our ways to protect and save species that we cause to go extinct in the near future, based on the things that they find. I wish that it were not as much of a company Colossal is, but they have to make money. This is the interesting balancing point between science and industry, or science and private, our market. And I am questioning. But anyway.
Yeah. So I'm unfamiliar. And so this is probably a wrong time to bring this up because you might be unfamiliar. And then we're just like, oh, I don't know. Go look it up.
I don't know, maybe.
But has Colossal done anything?
No.
I feel like Colossal's been raising funds for
$235 million in some 13 labs or something like that around the world that they're collaborating with. They have published a couple of studies and they are working towards things. I don't know whether this has already resulted in patents or any intellectual property that would be valuable at this point. But that, I think, is what the concern is, that they're not creating intellectual property that will be public domain if they're not publishing and not undergoing peer review. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm interested. I'm following along and I'll keep everyone posted to what I learn, but I think it's very fascinating. We're not going to get a Tasmanian tiger.
I'm very fascinated with the idea of using convergent evolution. I also don't think it will work. I also think but you're talking about developmental triggers of growth in bone and things like it's like I can
but craniofacial morphology is different from we have convergent evolution to a similar shape and function, and that is, as they're seeing, probably driven by very related genes. There are certain genes that way back when became the drivers of form. And we know what a lot of them are, how they are related and how they work specifically during development in various species is the interesting question. And then again, this marsupial species, what are they going to do when the baby Tasmanian tiger / fat-tailed dunnart is ready to not be born yet, but is a little marsupial baby who wants to be in the pouch? Do they have a marsupial pouch? What are they working on? This is good technology. Tell me something else, Justin. You want to show me what it's like to ovulate?
let me teach you about ovulation. So this story is basically just a cool video on one level. The other is, this is from the Max Planck Institute of Multidisciplinary Sciences. They created a live imaging method that basically uses microscopy to do a time lapse. They did a 24-hour ex vitro, so in a lab, they grew mouse ovaries. And with this new technique that they've designed, they captured the process at 10-minute intervals over 24 hours, and it allowed them amazing detail of information. I don't know if you have the link there. If you can,
I do. Hold on.
Pull up a video for the streaming audience to
Hold on a moment.
Yeah. But basically, they also made tremendous discoveries in this. So normally, when you are doing these tissue studies, ovaries are kind of difficult to study. They're hard to get at where they are, and you have to have the timing like exactly right for the ovulation. It's basically a very quick process of releasing the egg. And by getting this live imaging, instead of having samples that are in slices of time, where you have captured an ovary in some stage of development, and then you can study it at this point or at that point of the egg. Sorry, you actually got to see the entire process. So it came in 3 phases. It is beginning to be released from the skin tissue, the follicle. Wait, where's my? I have to go and look for my. Yes. So it is. There's a follicle expansion. Then it contracts, ruptures, and then the egg is released. And it managed to capture all of this. It's
amazing. So I'm guessing this was they had eggs in a dish, probably donated, and
no, these are mouse. We're looking
mouse
at
eggs. Great,
yes,
donated by mice. Yes,
yeah. And these are transgenic mice, so that they have the colorations and things you say. They have markers that allowed it to show up in the imaging. But with this, they were also able to compare it to levels of different chemical releases at different time points. And that gave them an idea of what was driving the process of ovulation. And then they did knockout models of each of these chemicals to confirm that they were a causal role, and their knockouts would prevent this, that, or the other from happening. And so they basically got not just a nice video. They actually did answer a lot of questions or confirm a lot of theory about how ovulation works. So really a remarkable study, which is, the core of this, it's just lab tech. These images were captured using a combination of confocal and 2-photon microscopy. They did this live imaging over the 24 hours. Plus, they were also able to, do chemical testing at the different stages because this is lab dish created, so they have access to
the culture. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think
really
so the interesting thing is putting all the pieces together to make this possible within the lab, but then, starting to get at what questions is this going to answer, and how is this going to advance maybe, problems with ovulation when, why do you get ovarian cysts? Why do some ovulations go bad? Why do you release so many eggs sometimes? Like, there's so many individual questions that can go a little bit deeper into looking at the various layers of data that they've put together here.
Yeah, and it gives causal chemical release, hormone release interactions for each of the stages of that, like the 3 stages that they point out, and then the actual rupture has its own 3 stages built within that, each one triggered by something. And so knowing what all of the mechanisms are, then you can interrogate within a human model, are we missing one of these? Do we have a genetic variant that is preventing one of these releases? Like, I mean,
some part of this. And because you've seen all of it in the time-lapse process, you know what should be happening when, and when it doesn't.
Something that is almost impossible to do when you have a sample and say, oh, this looks like it's at that time point, and we can study what seems to be going on at this time point. Now you have the full picture. It's really, really fascinating.
That is super cool. More stuff. I want more videos of things that usually happen inside the body. I think that would be cool.
That's also super
Let's
awesome.
make that stuff visible. It would be so great. So good. Unfortunately, Blair's not here to talk about this, but people are looking at polar bears. We worry about polar bears these days as they are the so-called canary in the coal mine of our Arctic area and the melting ice caps. Apparently, a new study published in Ecology, the Ecological Society of America's journal, Scientific Naturalist, Stephen Atkinson and Kristen Ladra are publishing their work, Icing-Related Injuries in Polar Bears at High Latitudes. So polar bears, who we normally think of as being able to just jump and run across the ice, and they've got the thick pads and they've got lots of fur and everything's supposed to be perfect for their adaptation to that environment. This is the first time that injuries to the feet, skin ulcerations, ice buildup, hair loss, lacerations, have been reported. Apparently, 2 bears had ice blocks up to 1 foot in diameter stuck to their foot pads, which made it difficult for them to walk. So is this is probably a result of this transition in our climate. And so understanding how the melting ice and refreezing of the ice is affecting the animals that live on the ice and their ability to function and survive is incredibly important. They have looked at these bears in 2 different populations in the Arctic between Canada and Greenland, and they found numbers of bears that have lots of ice balls stuck to their feet, these lacerations. Yeah, the bears aren't happy. That's
so
where we're ending up. Yeah,
I feel like we talked about this a long time ago, but one of the things that prevents that in all kinds of polar species is having these hairs on the paws. That
they have hairs on the paws.
But I'm wondering if they're not as developed now. Or do you think it's just the ice is changed? Because one of the things that came up in all of this was that it was an epigenetic factor, that they thought that it could have been sourced in the prenatal hormone release from the mother, and that it was likely because of a more relaxed, less stress hormones. And so if those stress hormones are rising and it's affecting development, that could be affecting the hair follicle deployment on the paws. And then therefore you would have what we're seeing. There's also another report that's out from PLOS One. It's showing that toxoplasmosis is up in polar bears, that there are actually a number of pathogens that they're encountering.
Maybe because
they previously had not.
It's interesting. The authors for this study hypothesized that it's all related to climate warming, rain on snow events, creating moist, slushy snow that freezes onto the paws of the animals, warm spells causing melting and then refreezing. And then maybe this is the third is that the populations live on what's called fast ice, connected to the land near where freshwater glaciers meet the ocean. And that this means that seawater seeps up into the snow, and that allows the snow to clump on the bear's feet and cause ice.
But I feel like they've been doing that for a while.
I feel like the third one is probably the least likely hypothesis, but what do you know? I don't know.
Oh, I've never studied a polar bear up close, and I hope never to.
I will not be doing that myself either. This is This Week in Science. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We are here. If you are enjoying the show,
Both.
please
I love it. Yeah, if you're joining the show and enjoying it.
Yeah, I put the words together. Please share the show with a friend. Please share with someone now if you're enjoying it right now. And if you really, really enjoy the show, head on over to TWIS.org and click on that Patreon link. It'll send you over to our community site for support, and you can become a supporting member. And at any amount, $10 and more a month, and we will thank you by name at the end of the show. Are we ready to come on back for more This Week in Science? Yeah. Okay, everyone, I would love to take this opportunity to bring our guest for the evening, Dr. Stephen Rouse.
Steve. It's Steve, not Stephen.
His full name's Stephen, but we're going to call him Steve. It's going to happen.
Either way is great.
Dr. Rouse is professor of psychology at Pepperdine's Seaver College with diverse research interests, from religiosity to personality tests to open science, and most recently, what people are willing to drink. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much for letting me come. I'm really excited to talk about a project that has been one of the most eye-opening and enlightening and exciting projects I've had a chance to take part in recent years. It's been really fun.
Yeah, I'm excited about. I was really interested in the idea behind the study, because there are so many things we're coming up against these days socially with, what are people going to accept as things change in our world, and how do we talk to people about things, and I think stuff like drinking water is incredibly important. So
Absolutely.
I thought this was fascinating. And before you jump into the study, though, can you start with, basic overview of your diverse interests, and how did you go from this diversity of things that you study into this one particular question?
Yeah, so I've kind of joked that I'm, well, not really joked. I've come to the realization that I have a short attention span. And so I love being at a place like Pepperdine where I'm not really necessarily expected to stay on the same research agenda year after year after year, where I have a little bit more freedom to be able to pursue one topic, and then if I get to the end of that topic, I go, ooh, that looks like an interesting thing over there, and then I get to wander after something else, and then ooh, and so I've enjoy getting a chance to explore where my interests are, and also to explore where my students' interests are. It's been really fun in recent years to be talking with students in class, and if a question comes up, it's exciting to be in a discipline where we don't just go, I wonder, but we say, okay, well, let's find out. Let's gather data, find out about that. So my research background kind of wanders all over the place.
I think but it's interest. Your overall interest is human psychology, and
that's right.
What makes us tick.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I got a quick question, because you mentioned, Kiki, the personality test.
Yes.
What does it say about me or somebody? Well, let's say I have a friend. It's too late.
Hypothetically.
Hypothetically, what does it say about a person when they're terrified of taking a personality test?
What it says is that we've elevated the importance of personality tests up above where they should be. I study personality tests. That's one of my primary interests, but I think a lot of times we've acted as though personality tests can tell deep, dark secrets about a person that no one else will know. The reality is a good personality test can describe you about as well as a good friend might be able to describe you. But because we've developed this mystique and this stigma about, or this mystique about what a personality test can do, that it kind of intimidates us. So you are not alone, or the friend you're talking about is not alone.
Yeah, the friend. Well, no, this friend apparently worked at a major retailer.
Okay.
Years and years ago. I think they're still in business, but part of getting into the management program was a 50-question, basically, personality test that had, it's 4 categories of answers all the way through the thing. But I was just like, my goodness. And at some point, I'm actually being made to make moral choices. Do I do the empathetic answer, or do I do the reasoned answer? And there's an imaginative answer that's the creative one, but maybe they don't want that, and then you're overthinking it. But then you're also making these deep sort of philosophical choices within yourself. Am I empathetic, or am I purely a logical creature? And you have to it was very demanding.
For people who think about how they think and how they think about answering questions on tests, it becomes a very meta.
Yeah, it wasn't just like, that seems like the right answer. Like each one, I was like, oh, this is a deep moral, ethical, this crossroads, fork in the road that I've come across, that I now must pick a path for my future mental states.
And then they have the disclaimer, but this questionnaire is not going to be used to tell whether or not you should work here.
No, this one was very definitely like, this determines your future in this company. Yeah. This is kind of how it was presented. Yeah. But it was like I said, it was like 50 questions, but there were really only 4 category of question that they asked over and over again in multiple different ways, weighing them against the other components in that survey. So I'm always anytime I never don't take them ever since, but I'm always terrified. It's like, oh, I remember I have this like trauma of all the choices.
Yeah. I totally get that.
I think I'm indoor, outdoor, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. That's my. Sorry, I'm making fun of various tests right now. But I that. Okay, so Steve, you were going to tell us about your various interests that you're working on currently, or you have worked on.
Yeah, so it's covered anything that I or my students in my classes find interesting. And so the classes that I teach include like personality, psychological testing, human sexuality, and in those classes we come up with some really, really fascinating I wonder topics, and then get to go off and explore them. This study, though, was an entirely different kind of project, where it basically came to me, and I was so grateful that it did, because the local water district had some questions that they wanted to ask. And so they connected up with me to see if I would be willing to independently collect data, independently run some analyses, and answer some important questions for them. So I was really grateful to them, because this was an interesting topic that I didn't know I was interested in until I became interested in it, until I became invited. I and my colleagues became invited to work on this project. So got a chance to work 2 psychologists, 2 ecologists working together, along with one person who worked at the water district itself, to be able to answer some questions about how to help people become more accepting of purified recycled water.
So
that doesn't sound hard.
When
you say it like that, then it's just like, what do you think about purified recycled water?
We have so many people have purifiers.
Right? For recycling.
We have
what could be wrong with that? Why did that need a messaging check?
We have tap purifiers, so people are familiar with purified water. But what is the recycled aspect? I mean, gray water
is rainwater and turn it into drinking water, right? That's what I would think.
Yeah.
Is there more than that, though? I mean, is it wastewater systems, not just gray water, but like the full wastewater recycling?
Okay, yeah. So like I'm coming to you from Southern California. I'm on the Pepperdine campus in Malibu.
Where there's fire. It's just constant fire.
Yeah. And actually, that's very relevant to this, that we go through periods of drought. But let me back up a little bit. If I were to go right now and pour some water down the drain, that water would be, processed to make it safe to be put back into the environment, to be poured out into the streams and rivers, and that would eventually get to the ocean. But that's a lot of water that is being lost. That's a lot of water that is being wasted, because here in Southern California, in the LA area, we've got a major city in an area that does not have access to a very large amount of groundwater. About a third, my understanding is, now keep in mind, I'm a psychologist, I'm not a water scientist. I've become very educated about this, but
Right.
coming to you from the perspective of a psychologist. But apparently about a third of the water that is used in Southern California comes from local groundwater. The majority of it either comes to us from Northern California, or it comes from the east, through the Colorado River. And so a lot of the water that we're drinking here in Southern California is flowing past communities and farms that would love to have access to that water. And we're as a city that is continuing to grow, that's not it's not sustainable to have us use the water once and then just dump it into the ocean. And so the local water district is beginning a process by which they're going to begin using purified recycled water as part of the water source for tap water. So the way this system is going to work is that as the water gets processed once to the level that it could be released back into the environment, released back into the rivers and streams, it's then going to go through a 3-stage process. There's like an ultrafiltration process, there's a reverse osmosis process, and then there's an ultraviolet oxidation process. So the water becomes completely pure. And so, in fact, I've got some of the water with me right now. Colleagues at the water district were willing to give me some of the water. This water is the purest water I've ever drunk. It's amazing to drink something. The kind of comparison, I remember when I was really young, one time went to the Carlsbad Caverns, and if you've gone to a big cave, you may have had similar kind of experience where they turn the light off and there's no light at all, and you experience for the first time true darkness. Drinking this water is kind of like almost the gustatory equivalent of the visual experience of having no light. It's bizarre to drink something that has absolutely no taste, because then you realize I've been tasting things in the water that I've been drinking until now. And so, in fact, this water is so pure that if you drank nothing but it, it's so pure it would actually begin leaching calcium out of your bones, because it's that
I was
pure.
going to say, it needs to have the minerals in there.
Exactly. So once it goes through this 3-stage process, becomes incredibly pure, it then gets released into the local reservoir. And my understanding is that once it gets released, an individual water droplet would take roughly 2 to 4 months to go from where it gets released to the place where then it gets pulled back out again. And so it has a chance to mix with the water that does come down from Northern California in this natural reservoir, or in this reservoir. Then it's treated again to EPA standards, and it is drinkable, consumable. So the technology works. This technology is not new. This is technology that works and has been around for a long time. I mean, if you think about it, like the space station has been using recycled water for decades. There's not springs of pure water up in space, and there's lots of other communities that have been using this kind of technology, but people kind of have a knee-jerk reaction when they hear about this was water that at one time had been waste. And so the Las Virgenes Water District decided they really wanted to invest time, money, and effort into getting the community comfortable with the idea of this before it went live. And so they contacted me to evaluate the effectiveness of some of their educational programs. So that's kind of a drawn out origin story for the study. Does that all make sense so far?
Yeah, absolutely. And being from Northern California and having lived in Southern California, I can tell you one, Northern California, it's not just straight from the Sierras down to Southern California. There's all kinds of farmland and everything else that you're going to experience. And it's not sent in underground piping. It's sent in these big above ground trenches.
Aqueducts.
So that water's already getting exposed to all sorts of human influenced environments on the way down, which I think the part that was from being in Southern California, I didn't even know people drank tap water. I never saw that. But
that's one of the next questions. But yeah, there are many questions about the study.
That part that you mentioned about reintroducing it to the reservoir as the method of not only mixing with and sort of gaining the mineral content, but then going through the normal process of purification that would take place from the water. That's the sort of was the missing link in my head about how do they get from, yes, you can do this, you can purify the water, but then how do you get it back up to a drinking standard? And that makes total sense now. That you would just reintroduce it to the natural environment where you're pulling it from in the somewhat natural in the reservoirs as the premix, and that's brilliant, actually.
So, it really is, yeah.
Yeah. So, but thinking about the people who are drinking the water. So, like Justin said, who drinks tap water in Southern California? You know, people have their bottled water or their whatever. So did you ask people as they came in where they got their water, what their thoughts about their water were ahead of time? Do they think about where their water comes from? Did you ask these kinds of questions as you came into the study?
Not those kinds of questions. Those would be good questions to ask about because, yeah, a lot of times we don't think about where the water comes from. I grew up even though I'm in Southern California now, I grew up in Denver, and I used to always think about, that I'm drinking this pure mountain water.
Rocky Mountain runoff.
Exactly. But then I started to realize when I was in high school, wait a minute, the town of Georgetown is upstream from here, and there's another Idaho Springs is upstream from here, and thinking, okay, actually, I'm drinking water that has already gone through several communities first before it actually came to me. So, earlier, Justin, you said at the top of the show, you talked about how all water is reused water, and that's absolutely true. Not even talking about all the water that then gets evaporated and rained down again. Even the water that comes in a stream goes past different communities, is reused, is used, and then passed on to someone else. We're just kind of in an area where the last and any water that gets down the drain doesn't really have any other communities further downstream, and that's such a waste for that water just to be lost. And so,
and also how much water is going to keep coming there. So you have to plan for the future, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Because we are in a drought-prone area. And so the Las Virgenes Water District invested money to got some great grants to be able to create a demonstration center. And so this is like a mini version of the whole water treatment plant that is eventually going to go online. And so this treatment plant or this demonstration center is available for people from the community to be able to come and visit and to be able to walk through the process of seeing this 3-stage purification process. And then at the end of the process, they get a glass of water and can actually try some of the purified recycled water. And there's just a really powerful experience of being able to drink it and realize how pure and how perfect it tastes. So what we were doing is that we would test people in their attitudes about purified recycled water. And we actually conducted 2 studies. The team conducted 2 studies. The first study was a standard pre-post study. We had a group of participants come to the water demonstration center, took a test to measure their attitudes about purified recycled water, and the attitudes were pretty diverse. But then they went through the demonstration center, and then at the end, they were asked to take that same test again and to given a chance to drink some water. And if I don't move around enough, my lights go out. So you may see me every now and then having to do that. So at the end of the tour, though, their attitudes were substantially higher than they were at the beginning. In fact, every single person was willing to drink water at the end of the tour. And so the second study we conducted was a randomized experiment where half of the sample was able to go through the tour and able to get the educational experience and then take the test of their attitudes of purified water, whereas the other sample or the other half of the sample just simply took a second test of the purified recycled water attitude, and dramatic difference in the acceptance of it. And so we were able to see twice that this demonstration center works. There's a powerful experience in being able to see it for oneself and be able to realize, now this is good. This works.
So the people that were there though, did you see them as they were doing the study and see like, oh, they're hearing about, wait, it's recycled, and did they have like funny faces, like the
Oh, yeah.
disgust faces, or like was there a change with that education?
Yeah. So, even when I tell my students about this, every now and then when I talk about the whole nature of the project, I see students give that kind of disgust expression. And so we did actually have a component to this study that, oh, we wish that it had worked, but we didn't really, frankly. I'll just be honest. I didn't think through one element of it before the study went live. We had some software that can measure subtle facial muscle movements, especially those facial muscle movements related to different emotional experiences. And so the idea was that we might be able to see whether a person's facial expressions might show more indication of disgust if they hadn't gone through the tour than if they had gone through the tour. Um, like I said, though, I didn't really think through one element of it enough, and we didn't do enough pilot testing because as people are raising a glass to their mouth to sample
Just
it, you're
hides everything.
blocking part of the face that
The
shows the
software can't deal with
disgust.
the
And
glass.
so,
Yeah.
exactly,
Mhm.
exactly. But we even in the randomized experiment, people drank the water, and people were, in fact, in both groups, people were willing to drink the water, and it was exciting to see how much the attitudes had changed.
So something that you alluded to before, we've been talking about when being in high school in Denver.
Yeah.
In high school, grew up in a town that had well water.
Okay.
Back then, it was exclusively well water. It
Yeah,
tasted
same.
terrible because it had high mineral content, like beyond. But my concept of wastewater treatment plants was that they treated the water and then released it back into the water ecosystem. So, and then, in LA, it makes sense, especially like Malibu. I remember not being able to swim in Malibu or down to Santa Cruz because there was a wastewater plant that had ruptured and there was sewage getting sent out into a pipe into the ocean that's normally sending out the purified water. What happens inland with all of the wastewater treatment plants? Because those are already treating the water that's been used for sewage and everything else, was sewage at one point, or tap water going down the drains, what have you. What is that? Where's all that water go?
That's a good question. Remember,
Because
you've got the psychologist here, not the water
no,
scientist.
I
So,
know. I'm
yeah.
sorry, but I'm like,
No, that's a
You're
good
like, I
question, but
don't know.
if
I
you're
hadn't
like
thought about that.
200 miles inland, it's not like there's
Yeah.
a pipe running all the way to the
Right.
ocean to get rid of everything.
There are
Is
lots of rivers and tributaries. There are lots of places for
but
water
these
to
are the
go.
rivers that then are being used as drinking water downstream from it. So aren't we already doing this? Because again, in high school, I assumed that's what a wastewater treatment plant was cleaning the water so that we would put it back into the system.
Yeah. To be honest, I don't know. I know that here it's just released into the streams.
So
But
maybe it's
good
just an
question.
LA
I have
thing,
no idea.
right?
And I do know that's how it is in Colorado too. My dad is a hydrogeologist, and so he and I had a chance to. Just to be honest, sometimes he and I don't have a lot to talk about. So this actually was a really great
That's
project for
cool.
us to be able to connect in an unexpected way, And so I know that in Colorado, that is a big part of it. That it's released also into the rivers after it's processed. But yeah, I don't know. 'Cause I spent a little bit of time living in West Texas, and so I know exactly what you're talking about the well water.
Okay.
Different kind, yeah, and it's
Yeah.
where you can actually see lime floating in it, yeah.
Oh my goodness, yeah. Or the faucets. Every faucet had
Yeah,
this
So,
right.
so here where I
this
am in Portland,
mineral
Oregon,
growth.
the anecdote up here is that we are still working and continue to work on the big pipe project. They are replacing a lot of our sewer pipes because in the winter, when the big storms come, they push all of the sewer pipes out and those overflow. The overflow is into the Willamette River. The Willamette River goes into the Columbia River, and that, people fish. There's all sorts of stuff. And there for a very long time has been a lot of disgust about swimming in the Willamette River. You don't catch fish. And so it's been a big project to clean up the river. And so the big pipe project has more capacity, make sure that it doesn't overflow. And they're actually taking that wastewater and then dealing with it and treating it. And so then yeah, it's a whole new situation. But there's the disgust in the environment that you're in, and the water and where it goes. Everyone knows the quote unquote LA River, which they've been working on making better, not so dangerous. But then there's the water you drink, and I'm wondering if this is part of the acceptance or the advertising campaigns that have been used to sell people water. It's from nice places, the bottled water, the things that you buy, right? And so people think the bottled water that they're buying is actually cleaner and better for them than the water that comes out of their taps.
Yeah.
And it's actually less regulated.
And it's less, right. It's a huge deal. I don't know. Do you have any further questions about this psychology of the acceptance of the water we're drinking, and what people seem to be willing to accept or not, and why?
There's I want to give a shout out to someone whose research I really, really admire. I've never met him, but Paul Rosen is at University of Pennsylvania, and he's done some amazing research on just human disgust and the disgust reaction. And human disgust is fascinating. That it probably was so beneficial to our species, back helping our species survive the Pleistocene era, to be a species to recognize maybe we shouldn't use the bathroom close to our food source and water source. That was probably really helpful for us to have the ability to be disgusted. But evolution kind of rewards survival more than it rewards rightness. And sometimes some of the products of evolution may actually not be logical, and we may have some disgust reactions even when that's not really rational or realistic. And so I know that Rosen and his colleagues did one study that I found really fascinating, where he went through several different stages of asking people whether or not they'd be willing to drink, for instance, 1 part sewage mixed with 1,000 parts pure water. And most people kind of, not that. But then what about
That was
if
my
it
face.
was, yeah. What about if it's purified and goes through a pipe to your faucet? Well, the pipe isn't enough to purify it. But if it goes 100 miles down a fast flowing river, yeah, sure. Or if it gets mixed in with a lake, yeah, sure, I guess that would be fine. And so through this series of questions, was able to see what are the processes by which disgust can be overcome, because disgust, there's a concept called contamination permanence, that once we think of something as contaminated, it doesn't become non-contaminated unless there's something powerful to overplay it. So this is a study that I always feel like I have to take a big dose of suspension of disbelief about it. But in one study, people were asked to think about, what if you have this sweater and you find out that this sweater had once been owned by Adolf Hitler? Would you wear it? Well, people say, no, I would not. But what if you find out that this sweater, a cursed sweater, yeah, it'd be almost the evilness contaminating the sweater. But what if then, after it was owned by Hitler, Mother Teresa wore it? People generally are more accepting of it in that condition.
So yeah, this is really fascinating. So there's an element. There's a story I'm going to talk about later in the show about doulas. Spoiler alert: cesarean deliveries were 47% lower for Medicaid patients who were assigned doulas. Now, the doulas are not medical practitioners. What they're providing is information. They're answering questions. They're doing some patient advocacy, but they're really explainers, and helpful hints, bring this go bag with you, but also sort of translating what the doctor is saying when it's not immediately understood. And I'm kind of seeing the correlation here, where once people had the basic education of what to expect and what concerns were not actually going to be relevant with this that it changed their attitudes and
Right.
it changes the outcomes then of people accepting these things.
Yeah. But what amazes me is that there's some things that are harder to get over than other things. Like, for instance, the idea of purified recycled water still causes a knee-jerk reaction for some people, whereas we have entire communities that still are drinking water that flows through lead-based pipes.
Yeah.
And here we have contaminants that have been empirically shown to increase the likelihood of ADHD, to decrease IQ and decrease cognitive reasoning abilities. And that does not cause the knee-jerk reaction that purified recycled water does. I'm grateful that
Wow.
just a few weeks ago, EPA developed a new rule, and I think there was like I can't. I should have looked this up ahead of time. I can't remember whether it's 2.6 million. I don't remember how many zeros there are, but I think it's 2.6 billion dollars for some major communities to be able to finally, once and for all, get rid of the lead-based pipes, because
Which would be
that is
amazing.
empirically demonstrated to be really, really detrimental to entire communities, and yet we don't have the kind of disgust, knee-jerk reaction about that.
I think that is a really huge point. It really kind of is that our negativity bias? Is it what we have been already primed to feel more negatively about? Is it distance? It's somebody else
Yeah.
having lead pipes versus us drinking the purified water.
This is just opinion. I just feel like it's a body thing as opposed to a mineral thing. Lead just doesn't seem as icky as body-related processes.
That's a terrible, like I do remember, I lived in an older part of Hollywood for some of my LA time. And I do remember you'd turn on the faucet and you'd have to let it run until it stopped being brown. Is the piping in the building or maybe in the neighborhood? I don't know.
Flaking. It's no big deal.
Just a bunch of, but it was
it's normal.
Like a normal, first step. Like you were, but and even in the olden days of growing up in the town with the well water that you would think is so separate from all, because this is where that came from. It's like, yeah, our water tastes bad, but it comes from a well, so it's pure. It's not that wastewater treated stuff that everybody else is drinking. We got the better water, even though it tastes terrible. And then, of course, years later, they did testing and found all kinds of benzenes and things that aren't supposed to be drunk, that were above the levels that you would want to be giving.
Fertilizer.
All sorts of things that work its way into, So
pesticides. Oh, I grew up on wonderful water.
Anytime. Farm water is, by the way.
Farm water is amazing.
That's make you glow in the dark.
I probably do. I've never checked. I don't know.
But I think once people understand that ecosystem, knowing that a purified water is higher regulated, or even your drinking water is better treated and more free of contaminants than the water you would get from a bottled water, or my goodness, drinking from a lake or a river or anything like this. That it's actually a much cleaner version of water than what they've been accepting.
And even if you were to go right now to like a camping supply store or a hiking supply store and you get a water filter, those water filters are not regulated. So we get safer water out of the tap, and yet there's some suspicion about that. So
the question for the future for education, I think, and the messaging is, not everybody's going to be able to make it to these education centers. Not every treatment facility will have the funding to have these kinds of walkthroughs and educational outreach initiatives. So, how do we message moving into the future when we would love people to have water that we're creating sustainably, that we are trying to develop new ways of living in areas where maybe there's not enough, or whatever it is. But
Hmm.
how do you go against the marketing messaging that has
Yeah.
billions of dollars from the big corporations versus, it comes out of your tap and it's been tested and it's clean.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Good question. I
good
don't know.
question. Okay. All right. Did you have any other interesting insights from your study, or just other questions that you're interested in looking into with your students?
Well, we've kind of, like I said, focus on a topic for a while, and then I kind of go into a different topic. And so, I have really, really loved this project, and we may do a little bit of additional follow up to it, but kind of gotten to a point where now I've found some other topics in some other areas completely unrelated. So maybe in a couple of years, I can come back and talk about something else too, in a
All right.
totally different range.
Awesome. Would you recommend that we refer to the purified recycled water, as toilet water?
I would think that that would be a very, very inaccurate way to describe it. And in
I
fact,
think so too.
often it's referred to as like toilet to tap. And that phrase is so wrong because it's really like
Mhm.
toilet to first processing to, ultrafiltration to et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, to
And they're
finally.
trying to be transparent in the name, but at the same time, it might also be undermining what they're
Well,
trying to achieve.
in some communities, that phrase "toilet to tap" has actually not been used by the people who are behind the process, but
Mm,
instead people who are trying to shoot that process down.
got it.
And so that because that phrase
Mhm.
does kind of bring back the kind of yuck factor, and
Yeah.
so that's a phrase that my understanding is the communities where there's been some controversy about implementing this, that phrase was kind of used in a almost antagonistic way to lower attitudes about it.
Yeah, there was
Yeah, just,
a comment in
just
our chat here actually saying that in San Diego, they used the phrase toilet
yeah.
water, and they were able to like stop an initiative to
Yeah,
actually
right,
using recycled water in this manner.
exactly.
Yeah.
Speaking from somebody who grew up in farmland, they don't grow your produce in honey. Okay, like you gotta understand, like all
Nobody
of
knows
this
where their
is
food comes from. It all comes in
all of
packages.
this is connected. Like
Right.
we're not we're
Yeah, I've been using the phrase toilet this evening, and it's knowingly sensationalistic. And, I assume the intelligence of my listeners in this conversation to know I use it in humor and not in seriousness. So,
yeah.
and
Well,
there,
All
now
your
it's time for you
yeah.
to wave your arms.
all of your
My arm
food
waving.
is
Yeah.
grown in poop. Like
Yeah, yeah,
that's how we do it. That's
Mhm.
what
right.
works. That's what makes it grow. So
Yeah.
Yep.
yeah, get educated, get over it. Uh,
I
John
like that.
Hogan,
I want that T-shirt. Get educated. Get over it.
yeah, John Hogan in the chat room is asking, ever see what ends up in a hot water heater? Is that bad to drink? Yes. It's not ever recommended to drink your hot water because your hot water heaters, typically, most hot water systems do gain a lot of contaminants and mineral buildups
And
over
you
years.
never know. There could be extremophiles in there. We don't know.
You don't
If it
know, but you are
water's
supposed to drink it.
yellow.
If the water supply has been shut down due to a major earthquake or some other catastrophe, then it can be a source. Then go ahead, it's worth it. Um, but yeah, typically you're not supposed to drink that. So don't use hot water and then boil water to like preheat it or anything like. None of that. Only drink
Weird.
the cold water because it's not gone through that extra potentially contaminated stuff.
Yeah.
Steve, do you have anything else you want to add about this study, or any other work that you're currently interested in that you want to comment on? Or
Um, that kind of broad, open-ended question
no,
is kind of a
very, very.
paralyzing question to me. Ah!
I do that
Yeah,
to
so
people. Deer in headlights.
yeah, but I have moved on to, especially currently working on some questions that some students and I were curious about
Mhm.
during my human sexuality class. And so, yeah, in a couple of years, maybe I can come back and tell you about some cool things we've been finding out there.
What was the question? What's the question at least?
I know. Like, what's the question? Leave us
okay.
hanging.
So one of the things that some of the students and I were talking about last time I taught this class was the recognition that the majority of people, and by that I just mean at least more than 50% of people, engage in porn use at least on an occasional basis. And at the same time, the majority of people, again, more than 50%, at least have some objection to pornography. So if you think about that Venn diagram, there are a lot of people who are engaging in a behavior that is causing them distress because of some incompatibility with their values, with their value systems.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're beginning the process of kind of looking at what are the kinds of oppositions that people have about pornography, and especially with kind of an eye toward I'm not a big fan of a big industry, the porn addiction industry, which makes a lot of money without much promise for actually helping people, because the method that's used is not going to help someone who's engaging in a value discrepant behavior. And so we're starting to look at, is a person's opposition due to like exploitation of people, or is a person's opposition due to any kind of religious belief, or is a person's opposition due to unrealistic expectations that they may have. So there's multiple reasons why a person may have some opposition. And so if a person's wanting to address a value discrepant behavior, maybe instead of treating everyone in a cookie cutter way as though everyone has the same basis of their opposition, maybe we need to start looking into where the opposition is for each individual person. If they're engaging in something that they want to reduce, how can we help them reduce that behavior? Now we're just at the
reduce the
very, very
behavior
beginning
if it's disturbing or in conflict, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
If
it's
so,
a problem.
where is the discrepancy coming from, and what is the cognitive dissonance that a person's going through, and how do we understand that? Because I think that kind of approach might be better than just the ineffectual approach that is often used in the porn addiction industry. So went from studies about
I love it.
hiding autism, demasking autism symptoms, to studies about water purification, to porn. So I kind of all over the place, but that's what I love about my job.
Yeah, but also the bottom line here is that you're bringing your students into this inquiry process, and so you're giving space for the next generation of scientists, also for scientific training, the thought process to take place, so that and that you're helping them focus these questions and these projects, and actually create and answer some questions, hopefully, or get some relevant information. That's really cool.
Yeah, that's why I love working at a place like this where I can do that.
Super cool. I was like, wait, you can do that in science? I thought you had to be super focused. What? Hold on. All right. So we have a few more stories to go. Do you want to hang out and talk about them, or are you going to?
I'd love to, if you don't mind, some blank slate questions of complete ignorance going into the topics. I love it.
Perfect. That's how I approach everything in life.
I know. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Rouse. This is This Week in Science. If you are loving the show, even if you're not, I don't know, head over to TWIS.org, click on our Zazzle link. You can find our merchandise there, hats, pens. I don't know if we have pens. Maybe you can find a pen. TWIS.
Do we have pens?
I don't know. We have mouse pads and hats and all sorts of things. I don't know why I said pens. We might.
Now we have to make them.
Now I have to make a pen. But if you would like to help support the show, Zazzle is a great way to find bits of TWIS that you can carry around with you throughout your day. All right, come on back, Justin. It's a good pen. It's a great pen. It's your turn, Justin.
Oh, let's talk about the doulas. This is
all right, I want to talk about doulas.
Yeah, so this research was following up. Basically, doulas are not medical advisors. Well, they're not. Yeah, they don't do medical care. Doula is something
Experienced
that
ones have experience with stuff, but yeah, they haven't been trained in medicine. Yeah.
not necessarily, but they are not like a midwife, which is going to be
Right.
a degree, and they're going to be involved in delivering the child and giving you medical advice and doing the evaluations along the way. A doula is somebody who's basically there to inform, to educate, and to advise mothers who are expecting. They can also be in an advocacy role, so that when, say, a mother has come up with a birth plan, say that plan is to have a natural birth and to avoid C-section, the doula's role is to also advocate for that patient when the doctor is deciding, well, it'd be easier to do a C-section, as an example. And saying, well, the patient, our patient has requested this and only wants that option as a last resort if it's an emergency situation, these sorts of things. So there's advocacy, there's education. They will do the sort of, not the ultrasounds, but the one where you're just listening for the heartbeat kind of a thing. So this study was intriguing to me because when we were assigned a doula in my small farming town back in, I think, 2002, 2003, when my first child was born. So this thing was astounding me that this has only become something that was included with Medicaid in 2020. It sort of was expanded, and it's still not in every state. It's still not everywhere where this is available, but it was in 2020, the Surgeon General recommended coverage for doula services to expand access to quality maternal care, followed by a 2022 White House initiative to address these disparities by allowing doulas to be covered under Medicaid. Depending on your insurance companies and everything else, you may or may not have ever encountered or heard of this. But they looked at, 1 million live births in these 9 states, narrowed it down to 722 pregnancies with doula and 722 without. This was propensity score matching, so that there was controls on age and race and socioeconomic status. And they found that with a doula, cesarean deliveries were 47% less likely. Also, very interestingly, there was a 29% lower risk of preterm birth. And then into that sort of how knowledge adapts people's perception, they found that people who had had a doula were 46% more likely to attend postpartum checkups compared to which is the one that I actually found kind of actually more intriguing. Like the reduced cesareans totally makes sense, because it is already considered something that American medical has more cesareans than the rest of the world in percentage.
We have things to do. We got to schedule it, chop, chop.
It's efficient for the doctor, but it can have ramifications on future deliveries as a potential. So it's in which was another element that they found, that this was also by preventing cesareans, that you could be creating future fertility functionality. But that much higher postpartum checkup, to me, said they now understand the process and trust the process and know why they are going to the postpartum checkups, because there's a value that they have now built for why they're going, where the group that didn't have a doula explaining and educating about this maybe once in a lifetime process that these mothers are going through, now they're informed and know why they want to re-engage with with these checklists.
Or how, not just why, but
Mhm.
how.
How and why, right?
There's
So,
very often there is just for many women, they have no idea what they're doing, what's going on. And if it's not just,
Mhm.
it's being lost inside of being lost. It's, and I wonder, does the doula relationship last beyond the birth? Is the doula still there after? Is the doula only there as that that transition, that person that is between the hospital and the mother, the family? What is the relationship that's involved here, and was there a difference at any point with any part of the populations they were looking at?
yeah, actually, there was a slight. Let me go find it here if I got it. There was, yeah, okay. So in counties with high infant mortality rates, cesarean deliveries dropped by 57% with the women with doula support. So it was actually another 11% higher, 10% higher in those sort of underserved communities. So the effect was bigger there, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was a lack of significant findings regarding emergency department visits, inpatient admission, postpartum depression or anxiety. These were not affected, meaning, yeah, the doula didn't solve all of the problems, but it didn't contribute to them either, right?
Right.
So it didn't have any negatives and had all these positives associated with it. In this study, you can kind of look at, so there have been previous studies that indicated that this should be the trend and is the trend elsewhere. But this one was post-expansion in Medicaid. And basically then you can kind of look at it like, this is the follow-up. How did our expansion work? What is the result? And so what it shows is extremely positive. Therefore, it's very likely that this will get expanded further. I don't know. It doesn't explain whether the doulas are doing the follow-up or if it's at the hospital. So I don't know
just,
if it was
normal channels. If there's extra communication after the fact.
But I could see if in the group that had, I guess 46% lower follow-up after, I could see that maybe if they didn't understand the benefit of going to visit their practitioner afterwards, then they if they didn't understand why they would need to go, like, I'm fine, kid's fine, whatever, right? Then maybe that's why they weren't going. But it could be that they have to go there versus maybe the doula was visiting at home. So those are also, maybe there's a convenience factor involved, but it didn't pull those details out of the study. I'm just speculating there, like which way it might have played out, right?
Yeah. I'm wondering also. Oh, go ahead, Steve.
Oh, that's just really exciting, especially to find out about the extra information. That getting information begets the desire to get more information, and learning makes you realize the value in continuing to seek out learning.
Yep.
But I think it's the doula here is a human, right? This is a person who's interacting with you personally, who's like, how's it going?
Yeah.
Have you made this appointment? Did you do that? And this is your next step. And this is what you should expect. And just kind of leading you through the process, right? And like Justin said, also an advocate for you. And I recently read some news about Kaiser Permanente starting to do away with a lot of its in-person hospital tours for like the birthing rooms and the birth wing, so. And they're getting rid of in-person classes in a lot of places, so that in favor of online recordings. So you sit and you watch an asynchronous tour of the hospital, an asynchronous lecture or explanation of stuff that's going on. And
that is the tours are nice. The tours are not because
there's something about being in this space and seeing the people and walking through, right?
You're going to be in emergency mode when the day comes.
Right.
You're going to be in urgent freak out mode, trying to keep cool because you're not the one giving birth.
It's like, rainbows and marshmallows.
But knowing we park here, we walk here, take a left, and then it's going to be down the hall and to the right. Like knowing exactly where your footsteps will be on that day is exceedingly important.
Absolutely. Can definitely think about my own personal experience of just the ignorance just brings about all these panicked thoughts about what could possibly go wrong. And actually, we were able to go through a tour and we're able to see, okay, yeah, we can do this. And even seeing people in the process and think, okay, they're doing it, we can do it. This is good. So that is a shame. That's too bad.
But it just makes me wonder.
Reducing that.
Yeah, but it makes me wonder. It's interesting to see how the expansion of this within Medicaid has been beneficial, but then to see another, this is not Medicaid, obviously, but another insurance provider reducing the in-person, touch that, is so, which for this, I don't know, personal health, medical health, but there's something about birth and and motherhood that having and even just as a family, husband, wife, partners, whatever, going in and having people talk to you and reassure you and to have it depersonalized. I understand money, time, etc., but at the same time, I question how it's the real impacts it's going to have.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think influences why doulas are so important is just what you're saying. They are paid a tremendously lower salary than your PhD OBGYN. Meaning that they will be able to spend a lot more time with the patients than they may spend with the OBGYN.
Right. And the patient can't just call up the OBGYN all the time. You call and they're like, excuse me, I be on hold, or we're going to find, we'll find somebody else to answer your question. Or
so
having a doula
there is an economic driver that should be recognized in this, that you will get a lot more education in this doula system than you ever will in getting those quick meetings where they're going to check this, check that, check this, out the door kind of a scenario.
Yeah. With the human touch, education with the human touch.
Yeah.
Want to move to your next one?
Oh, what was the next one? What did it say there? Because I pulled up a whole bunch of other extras in case. Oh, this one is real quick.
You're like, what was I going to do? I wrote it down.
Yeah, I can. This is the global warming silver lining. I don't know how much. Well, here it is. Because one of the things we've all been most concerned about when it comes to global warming is how will it affect coffee production? Like that's the leading thing on everybody's mind.
Yes.
This is like the biggest concern. And I think the concern is maybe underrated.
Especially for you as a host of This Week in Science in Denmark at 5 a.m.
Yeah. So this is just real quick. This is a PLOS study. It says under climate change scenarios, 30 to 44% of 30 to 44% more land in Ethiopia may become suitable for growing Arabica coffee by 2080. Now, Ethiopia is, I think, the homeland. I think that's where coffee was. Maybe the homeland of coffee. I don't know. But this is one of the major producers of coffee worldwide. It is more than a quarter of Ethiopia's income currently. It is the largest growing industry of coffee anywhere in terms of more and more land. But to know that they're going to get up to 44% more land that will be suitable for growing coffee under global warming conditions, under two different models that were the scenarios that were run, is at least some good news.
I mean, there are these questions, right? How is the water going to be redistributed as climate changes? We can't make predictions of, we're starting to make very specific predictions. Apparently, New Mexico, Santa Fe, New Mexico area or Arizona is going to have more water. I don't know, but I don't know whether that means more floods, or whether that means more nice running rivers in an area that is now very dry.
It'll likely be both. Like, this is
Right?
kind
Yes.
of the
This
pattern.
is the how's
You
it
get
going to move?
the what is
Yeah.
it called? Not aerial river. What is it called? Atmospheric river.
Yes. We're
They,
supposed to have one of those this weekend in Portland.
will move from Portland, maybe down into Central California or places east, and dump tremendous amounts of water sometimes, and then nothing for a few years after. And it means it's more stochastic, unreliable, at least unreliable in the sense that it's not the pattern that we are accustomed to in 100 years of, the last 100 years of American climate, right? Which is just already like a very subjective starting point, deciding that this is how things always will be.
The question here with Ethiopia, though, is okay, South America, are you going to have what's going to happen to your environmental conditions for coffee and chocolate and things? And should you move your farms to Ethiopia?
But what it's also showing is that things will move. Like,
yeah.
As there's 44% more land available in Ethiopia, there might be 20% less somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Or like in South America, this is misremembering the information, is that it wasn't so much, I think, that the coffee growing overall areas were going to be reduced or increased, but that they would be moving. And so then you have a scenario of like, okay, like it's like if Central California, they're like, okay, Central California is no longer good at growing tomatoes. We have to move all of that to Nevada. That's not a thing that you just do overnight.
Right. Right.
That is a tremendous shift of industries, of infrastructure, of
knowledge.
Right.
Right. So, when we were talking about how much areas will be affected, sometimes we're not describing that those areas will not be in the same places. Right.
Because this article is specific to Ethiopia. And so, that's the question that came to my mind first of, okay, well, what about other places? Is this gain at the loss elsewhere? And what is the balance of losses and gains? And I think that's important for us to look not just at individual countries, but to look more systemically at the entire, the world ecosystem.
Yeah, I think that is the point.
Yeah.
How are we looking at it?
Yeah.
Did you have more to say about the coffee, Justin? Did you have
it was supposed to be a quick blurb at the end of the show there, because it was just like good. I usually bring terrible news when it comes to global warming. I look for the good news, and I'm like, oh, this looks like a good story. I'll bring this one. And then by the end of it, it slips. And I was like, oh, wait, I thought this was a good story.
No, you didn't. You knew negative. The whole time. All right. Well, let me move on to my last couple of stories as we finish up the show here. Social media. Some of us spend more and more time on different social media now that it's become more and more fragmented. Some of us are still on X. Others have moved to Threads. There's the Mastodon federated servers, Blue Sky. I'm on there. There's a butterfly. I follow the butterfly. There's so many different social media platforms, and researchers just published in iScience, so it is openly accessible to anyone, their study of the X, former Twitter platform, but it wasn't really, because they couldn't get the data anymore because the API has been shut down to researchers since it was purchased and is under new ownership. So the researchers simulated a social media platform that might be like X, which is formerly Twitter, in their research. So this is a simulation of something that might happen in the real world. And so the whole thing is like, is this really is it relevant or verifiable? Anyway, the question is, since X and other platforms have verified users, verification on some platforms is simply show us who you are and we'll say that you're a real person. And then it doesn't mean anything. It just means that you are then verified as a human being and as who you say you are. The new X platform is using verification as a pay for play. So if you pay for a subscription fee, you are verified. And the algorithm has been suggested to prioritize those paid verified users over others. And the question is, do these verified users then have an outsized influence on what's going on and what people are thinking on the website, on the platform? So the researchers were like, well, we can't get the data, so let's simulate it. And so they put together their computer simulation where they used verified individuals with very extreme biased positions that were very firm and unflexible, and then individuals who were verified who were more likely to shift their views as and listen to other people's, and have conversations with people. And what they determined is that verified users using what the assumed model for the algorithm in the X platform is, that verified users, yes, indeed, do influence the views and the ideas that take hold on the social media platform. And those users become more influential when they're less likely to talk to people. And people are more likely to start to just accept what those people say, as opposed to, have conversations and share information. So the fear is that when you have verified individuals who can reach more people and can significantly impact idea formation, that can reinforce echo chambers, which can have then ripple effects into not just that media platform, but also into other media outlets and also society in general. So the question is, what do you do about this moving forward? And we don't know what to do, but they plan to increase the realism of their model. They want to add news feeds and reposting, and they're going to incorporate data from other platforms that actually have more open APIs, like Blue Sky. So the concern is that you have media moguls or biased individuals with money who are paying for accounts, maybe even paid bot accounts, and pushing information in very biased ways that can have very negative influences. But maybe I'm a good person and I have lots of money and I have a really good bot network. It's great. What do we think about this? Are we still doing social media, everyone?
I'm not. I stopped a long time ago, and it was there was a point in the early days of the Twitter where the only people on Twitter,
it was me,
were interested and engaged in the subject they were discussing.
Right.
And at some point, the troll factory broke in and just started smashing conversation everywhere possible. And I love the idea of a open democratic conversation, but I think there should be an internal ethic of, I have something to contribute to this in a constructive way before an individual engages in the open forum of discussion. And I don't see that anywhere in there. What I see instead is just horrible banter, and it's just like not worth my time because I'm not getting anything out of it, and I'm not communicating anything of value or learning anything of value from a lot of the conversations that go on there. So for that reason, I basically stopped even looking at the social media.
But it is still a place where a lot of people spend their time and influences a lot of our society at this instant. Steve,
that's speaking specifically about the Twitter. There's other ones that I still don't like do postings or
you share your baby pictures. I know.
But yeah, you go like, it is like The worst thing is you get a phone call with somebody who you really would love to get an update from, but you don't have like a half an hour for the 100 distant friends of your past to all have half-hour conversations to catch up once every few months. Look, they have a new job. They've got a new kid.
So, but this is cost-benefit analysis, right?
Like,
so what is it for you as an individual? And I think each of us is doing that. But, you know, I don't know. I worry about our kids. I worry about our society in general. But
so if I missed it in the description of the study, please forgive me. But did they communicate to the participants what the verification represented? Because you're right. Like, is the verification just I've paid money and therefore I'm allowed to have this designation, or is it some kind of recognition of being a real person? In this particular study, did they educate that? Because I do feel like that's part of internet and social media literacy for people, to be able to find out what exactly does this verification mean. That it doesn't necessarily mean you're an expert on a topic. It means you paid money, or it means you are real. So did they at all communicate to the participants what that verification represented?
No, this was just they just had, these fake verification
so it's kind of like the real world.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, and they were just looking to see how different numbers of the verified users impacted the formation of ideas or of little echo chambers within the total. So yeah, that wasn't part of it.
Wow. This is an extension of a philosophy that has been, oh my gosh, now I've forgotten what the decision was by the Supreme Court. But that there's a philosophy that has been endorsed by the Supreme Court, which has allowed dark money to flow into politics, which basically states that money is free speech. And by incorporating that into a public forum type look, or something that appears like a public forum but is not, having people who pay into that system get more weighted speech is absolutely in keeping with that philosophy.
Yeah.
So I mean, to me, it's unsurprising that the algorithms are preferencing people who pay, coming from a company.
Unfortunate.
Citizens United. Thank you, David. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh. And that's why that, and what always escapes me is because it's such double speak.
But when we come down to it,
such a double speak terminology. Citizens United for corporations over citizen speech is basically what they should have called it. But of course they called it Citizens United, so it sounded friendly. That you want to talk about toilet water? That's what toilet water is.
That's toilet water. There we go.
They should have called it.
Yes. Yeah, but I think the point that Steve got at is the education aspect. And I think a lot of people don't understand how the platforms work that they're using. They don't understand the algorithms that are influencing what they see, and different topics they see, different users they see. I think education on that front would go a long way, to help pop these echo chamber bubbles. But yeah.
It's difficult, though, because the systems change so frequently. And so it's hard to have an education system with a constantly dynamically shifting topic that we need to make people literate about. And so how do you enhance literacy when you've got an ever-shifting topic, ever-shifting goalpost?
Yeah.
That's hard.
And I think this is a good segue into another story here, which is, you just teach people the best negative bias, one lesson. This is it. We could have taught people not to like social media, but we didn't do that. We didn't know the dangers. However, generative artificial AI or large language models. Let's just teach people not to like them. People are already starting out, not too keen on them. So let's just keep going this way, everyone. New study just just published using Chat GPT and stories written using the most recent version of Chat GPT. This is published in Journal of Communication. Researchers put two different versions of the same stories, one written by a person and the other by ChatGPT. And then participants judged how much they liked the stories.
However, did they flip it on them? Did they trick the people?
No, so they just said, how much do you like the stories? And generally, people liked the stories written by humans better, but the ChatGPT stories were a close second. They weren't as far off as you would expect. They just didn't lack. They lacked like the depth. It was as if they were, written at a more basic level. They lacked some of that, the detail and the whatever it is, that human factor that gets into a storytelling. And so, but it was close. But when they asked the participants to judge the stories and they told them this is written by a person or this is written by ChatGPT, GTP was terrible. People did not like those stories at all. They loved the stories written by people. They were superior. So what's interesting, I think, about this
did they flip it on the because maybe this is the same study and I just misunderstood it because I didn't bring it for the show. I didn't totally prep it, but it sounded like it was the stories written by humans. If the participants were told that they were written by ChatGPT, that they didn't like them.
Absolutely, yeah. But
so they did. Okay, so it was their bias decided whether or not they liked it. Not the material itself.
That's exactly it. But that was why they did that. But because they saw in the first instant experiment that they were very close. They weren't that far off. And so the question was, if people knew, would it be different? Or if they were told,
and I don't know if it was,
would it be different?
And I don't know if it was ChatGPT. It's the only one I know the name of. Otherwise, I've ignored. I've just at this point not been forced to learn the names of any other large language model thing that I have to keep in mind. So it's just branded now.
But what I'm interested here in is our human biases that are already, that they're ingrained.
I'll just say yes before you finish your sentence. Yes. Our human biases, yes.
Yes. So we know that in hiring in the sciences or even in ranking for NSF grants, that if gender or race are involved, there are differences in the ways that the applications or the proposals are ranked by the people doing the assessing. When you get rid of those identifying factors, those differences very often go away. Not always, but they're more likely to go away. So it's been shown time and again that when we know who we're assessing, we are already biased in a particular way. And this is just another example of that. But the extremity of it, I think is interesting, and I wonder if it will hold. And I wonder, where is it coming from now? And is it fear?
Of course. Yeah. There's an interesting thing that AI is doing with the music industry right now.
Oh, don't go there.
Pretty incredible. Which is it can take the voice of one artist and have them sing the lyrics of something else. There's some pretty fascinating mashups that now exist. And there's a huge outcry that this is ruining the future of music. But we've been through this so many times. We had, what is this synthesized music? You mean you won't have an artist playing all of the instruments? That will ruin music. What do you mean it can be recorded and shared? That will ruin music. What do you mean it will be like? video killed radio, and synthesized digital music killed live performances. Like, all of these things are happening regardless of how much anybody wants to pump the brakes on it.
Yeah.
So
do I want AI music? No, I want to hear I want to hear an artist that I can feel like, I've developed a relationship with them and their music over many years and enjoy what they create. I want to read stories from a person. I want to, there are certain aspects to the artistic creation of things that I, as an individual, and I think many other people, would like to continue consuming from people. But that's not to say that these generative and other tools that are artificial intelligence, quote unquote, which we have said many times before, they're not intelligent, but that they're good tools and we can use them as tools. But yeah, I don't know. Would you? How do you think, Steve? How do your students feel about the AI stuff going on?
So I've got a colleague who has done some really, really amazing work trying to educate her students about the limitations of ChatGPT, and so she's done a project where she has them generate a term paper, a very brief term paper using ChatGPT, and then go into that and look at what is accurate and what is not accurate.
Nice.
And even color code: green, this is good; yellow, red, no, these aren't even real sources that are being cited. And she's done a great job of being able to show that the students emerge from that experience a lot more skeptical, a lot more cautious about even using ChatGPT for their own work. Upper level students start out more skeptical than beginning level students do, but the realization of actually being able to see and evaluate a paper on a topic well helps a person kind of come to a realization that, this is not. It may sound good. The language itself may roll well, and the ChatGPT can come up with phrases that really communicate well, but it's not there yet.
So it's not.
They're not going to take my podcast yet.
So I totally agree. Like, the ChatGPT cannot write, and it when you're asking it to generate, you're asking it to make it up. Like, there have been lawyers who've cited cases that didn't exist because they asked for to generate a legal brief with references to case law, and it did, because it's going to do what you ask, even though those case laws didn't exist.
Yeah, it's not going to say, I can't do that.
Right. But what it
sometimes
is,
it does, and then if you wheedle it, it'll goes, okay, I guess I can do that, and then it continues.
But what I found it actually is really good at is analyzing a text that you have offered it. So I do this. I use this as I don't know if I'm supposed to say this. I use this as a tool sometimes when I'm writing up on a scientific research paper. I might have a 40-page paper that has 4 legs and is getting deep into method, technique, and things that I'm maybe not familiar with. If I put it into if I put this study into ChatGPT, I can ask questions about the study. What is the cohort size? What were the implications? Where does it reference how the groups were separated? And I found it to be highly accurate if you give it a specific text to work off of. Yeah. If you're asking it to go outside of a already set text, it has all kinds of, gosh knows where it's pulling information for. But if you limit it
hallucination, they call it hallucinate because it interpolates. It's a predictor, right?
But if you limit it to analyzing a text that you have provided it, it's actually really good at breaking down that information. So there's going to be uses for it that I think people may have not tapped quite yet. which is that it's not going to generate a story or tell a tale or give you a legal brief or do your work for you. But it can assist in analysis. And I found it to,
it will do those things, just not as
I found it to be highly accurate. Also, if you ask it to double check, it will. And sometimes it's like, it'll go, oh, oops, actually. So you even though it's good at analysis, you have to find that in the an original study to verify, because it can make mistakes. It's not perfect. But when you're dealing with a large volume of text, it's actually really good at being used as a tool of inquiry. You can ask questions about the study, and it can tell you whether that was covered, where it wasn't covered, or what the closest thing was, and where it references it. So, but don't let it write for you, because it just can't. It just doesn't get it.
All right, I am going to move us to my nighttime nightmare fuel for us.
Underwater
walking honey badger.
Wow.
Mab Robotics out of Poland has a four-legged dog-like robot that it normally doesn't go underwater, but they put it underwater, and this is the sound of a robot underwater at the bottom of a pool. You will not hear Jaws anymore. This is the sound you should be aware of. They used to say, worry about the robots until you can throw them in the pool. Now you can't throw them in the pool anymore. Whoop! I have robots in my ear. Woo! I didn't hit stop on the YouTube screen. Sorry, it was yelling. Mark Rober was yelling in my ear. But these Mab Robotics quadrupeds are currently being used, hopefully, for underground activities, for mining, for emergency situations, and maybe now for underwater work as well. Tink, 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 punk, tink, 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 tink. I will never forget the sound of these robots.
Yeah, I used to always think if a robot uprising happened, you'd just hop on a boat somewhere. But no, thank you.
No robot.
They'll come after you. Away.
Yeah, you're welcome. That's what I'm here for.
Nice.
Steve, thank you so much for joining us on the show tonight. It's so fun that you stayed and that you're still here. I love it.
Yeah, thanks for letting me join you.
Yeah, it was a fun combo, for sure.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
And everybody out there, thank you so much for joining us. Justin, we've done it, right?
I think we got to the end of another episode of This Week in Science.
I think we did. That's right. Okay, it's time for me to say lots of thank yous. Thank you to everyone in the chat room for being here and talking and for commenting and for leading some of our asides in the conversation. Additionally, thank you to who do we have? Gord and Arnlor, who help keep the chat rooms happy, nice places to be. Thank you to Fada for this, helping with social media and show descriptions. Thank you to Rachel for editing the show. Thank you to Identity4 for recording the show. And thank you so much to our TWIS patrons. Thank you to Eden Mundell, Alan Viola, Aaron Anathema, Arthur Kepler, Craig Potts, Mary Gertz, Teresa Smith, Richard Badge, Bob Coles, Kent Northcote, George Corris, Pierre Velazarb, John Ratnaswamy, Chris Wozniak, Baker Chefstad, Donathan Stiles, a.k.a. Don Stylo, Ali Coffin, Reagan, Shu Brew, Sarah Forfar, Don Mundus, P.I.G., Stephen Alberon, Daryl Myshak, Andrew Swanson, Fred S104, Sky Luke, Paul Ronovich, Kevin Reardon, Noodles, Jack Brian Carrington, David E. Youngblood, Sean Clarence Lamb, John McKee, Greg Riley, Mark Hessenflow, Steve Leeson, A.K. Zima, Ken Hayes, Howard Tan, Christopher Rappin, Richard, Brendan Minish, Johnny Ridley, Remy Day, G. Burton Lattimore, Flying Out, Christopher Dreyer, Artyom, Greg Biggs, John Atwood, Rudy Garcia, Dave Wilkinson, Rodney Lewis, Paul, Philip Shane, Kurt Larson, Craig Landon, Sue Doster, Jason Olds, Dave Neighbor, Eric Knapp, Lon Makes, E.O., Adam Mishkan, Aaron Parishan, Aaron Luthen, Bob Calder, Marjorie, Paul D. Disney, David Summerly, Patrick Pecoraro, and Tony Steele. Thank you all for your support of This Week in Science. We really cannot do any of this without all of you. And if any of you are interested in helping us keep the show going and supporting what we do, please head over to TWIS.org and click on that Patreon link to help with our with what we do here. And I would also like to tell you that we will be back next Wednesday with more This Week in Science and a guest. Our guest is going to be, I'm going to make sure, Juliana Fortier, who will be coming to us from UC Berkeley's Greater Good Science Center. And she's going to be talking with us about some of their recent initiatives and some very exciting stuff. Let's all be good, people.
Yes, and we will be back. Did we already say this?
I did. We'll be back. But then I said, but with an interview.
Yeah. Wednesday, 8 p.m. Pacific time. And then another show at 5 a.m. Thursday Central European time. So you can pick which one you want to attend. And we will be broadcasting those shows live from our Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook channels.
And if you want to listen to us as a podcast, search for This Week in Science wherever podcasts are found. If you enjoyed the show, get your friends to subscribe too.
For more information on anything you've heard here, show notes, links to stories are available on our website, www.twis.org, where you can also sign up for a newsletter that you might never even have to receive.
That's right. We do send the newsletter.
We're promising a newsletter for like 4 years. I'm not sure.
We got. You can send us an email though about our newsletter if you want.
If you would like to write a newsletter for This Week in Science, please contact us.
We love your feedback. If there's a topic you want us to address or cover, suggestion for an interview, let us know. One of our social media accounts, we might be there, or send us an email. Just put TWIS in the subject line so it doesn't get spam filtered into the bottom of the ocean with one of those four-legged robots. Ting, 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 ting. I will never be near that.
We look forward to discussing all great things about science again with you next week. If you've learned anything from this show, remember,
it's all in your head.
This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. 'Cause this week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth. And I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in 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 Science.